Everybody, welcome back to another episode of Shifty's 49ers Talk. In this video, we're previewing the Week 16 matchup between the San Francisco 49ers and the Washington Commanders. These teams are actually pretty darn close. I think it should be a close matchup, a good one at that, and there's a lot to talk about. So let's not waste any more time, guys. Let's jump right in. When we look at this as a bit of an overview, we have the 10-4 49ers hosting the 7-6-1 Washington Commanders. Looking at the 49ers, we are on a 7-game win streak, the longest in the NFL. We're also 6-1 at home. So Levi Stadium has been very kind to the 49ers with regards to record, but not with regards to our quarterbacks. Now, looking at the Washington Commanders, and they actually, the last 2 months, they've been playing good football. 6-2-1 in their last 9 games, and on the road they're 4-2-1. Now, to me, and I think Vegas actually kind of backs up that I think it's going to be a close game. Vegas has the Niners by 6.5 points, basically giving the 49ers a touchdown in this game. The over-under is only at 37.5, so they're definitely not expecting a high-scoring game, and that's going to make a lot of sense when we talk about the stats that both of these defenses are putting up, which is incredibly impressive. Now, coming up next, guys, we're going to talk about some of the biggest news surrounding both of these teams. For the 49ers, the reinforcements are coming, especially on the defensive line. Javon Kinlaw is back and is expected to play on Saturday. Kalia Davis, the rookie defensive lineman, also is practicing again. Don't know if we'll see him against the Washington Commanders on Saturday, but great to have him practicing and finally just getting that depth back on the defensive line. Now, here's some big news that also came out is that Mike McGlinchey has actually been playing with broken ribs for a couple of months now, so hopefully he'll be able to tough it out for the rest of the season. Look, I know he's had some really rough games, some really rough plays, but to me, he is the best option we have right now, at least when it comes to right tackle. Now, moving over to the Washington Commanders, and of course, the huge news out of Washington is that their very, very young, talented edge rusher, Chase Young, is actually going to be playing against the 49ers. It's the first time he's played football, live action football, in over a year, so we'll have to see how he does, but that does bolster that really good Commanders defensive line. Now, coming up next, what I want to talk about, guys, are some of the key stats when we look at both of these teams. Let's now jump into some of the stats for both of these teams. Now, looking at the 49ers offensively, 7th in yards per game, 11th in points per game. So really getting good production despite now being down to our 3rd starting quarterback of the year. Compare that to the Washington Commanders. Of course, they've had Carson Wentz. Now they have Taylor Heineke. They're 19th in yards per game and only 25th in points per game. They're definitely struggling to put up points on the board. Now, here's the thing with both the Niners and the Commanders, the defenses have been playing really, really good football. I think we all know from a Niner perspective, 1st in yards allowed per game, 1st in points per game. We've just been killing it, playing really good all year long. Almost at an elite level. Only giving up 15 points per game is insane. But the Commanders not that far behind. When you look at yards per game, the Commanders 3rd in yards per game, 9th in points per game. They're only giving up 19.7 points per game. And here's something really interesting, and we have to give the Commanders defense credit where it's due, because only twice this year has their defense allowed more than 24 points. The last time that happened was all the way back in early October to the Dallas Cowboys. And we know that Cowboys offense can be really explosive. So this Commanders defense playing really, really well, and they're getting arguably their best player back in Chase Young. So it's not to be overlooked. This will be the biggest test for Brock Purdy as we then go and approach the playoffs. So this is going to be really interesting to see how our offense performs and how Brock Purdy looks. Now, the final thing that I always love looking at is going to be in the turnover battles. In the NFL, the Niners are ranked 3rd third. We're +7 in turnovers. We've had 22 takeaways and 15 giveaways. Compare that to the Commanders, who are basically tied for about 20th in the NFL, -2 on the year. They've only had 15 takeaways and they've given the ball away 17 times. The big thing here when it comes to Taylor Heinicke, look, he's only thrown 4 interceptions, not that bad. 5 interceptions, but he's fumbled the ball 3 times in the last 2 games. So that's somewhere where the Commanders, and especially Heinicke, you cannot turn the ball over. And if we remember that game against the New York Giants on Sunday Night Football in key red zone opportunities. So if the Commanders want to be able to beat not only playoff teams like the Giants, but also teams like the 49ers, they certainly cannot do that. Now, next coming up, guys, I want to talk about 3 key matchups in this game. The first huge matchup in this game is going to be the 49ers offensive line against the Washington Commanders defensive line. The Commanders, similar to the 49ers, have invested heavily in the draft and in cap space on their defensive line. Talk about Daron Payne, Jonathan Allen, Chase Young, Montez Sweat. 3 of those 4 guys are basically on pace. They could all end up in double-digit sack numbers. Chase Young, of course, just coming back, and he's arguably the best of the bunch. Now, the 49ers offensive line, it's been a little bit of a mystery coming into the year. I think we've definitely figured some things out. What I find interesting is, of course, the rotation at right guard, Spencer Burford and Daniel Brunskill. But let's look at some numbers that actually really favor how well the 49ers offensive line has played. The Niners' 5th fewest sacks allowed in the NFL. Now, of course, some of that comes down to guys like Jimmy and Purdy and Trey Lance being able to whether escape the pocket, throw the ball away quickly, quick design passes, things of that nature, but still, regardless, 5th in sacks allowed. The Niners are top 10 in rushing when you look at just yards per game, and average, they're about middle of the pack, but yards per game, the rushing top 10, that's definitely a sign of the offensive line playing well. And last but not least, Trent Williams at left tackle. This is a huge revenge game for Trent Williams. Now, look, we did play the Commanders in 2020, but that 49ers team absolutely decimated with injuries, nowhere near being close enough to really compete. So this is going to be one that Trent Williams, he's circled this on the calendar. Kyle Shanahan, he's circled this on the calendar. Kyle Shanahan actually 0-2 against the Commanders so far as head coach of the 49ers. So he definitely wants to get one in the win column there. But it's not going to be easy, because if you look at this Washington Commanders defensive line, they're 16th in sacks, so not that great. But here's the big thing with the Commanders. They're 5th in quarterback hits. So they're getting after the quarterback. They're definitely causing hurries. They're causing pass rushes. They're basically forcing the quarterback to get rid of the ball before he wants to. So that could be critical down the stretch, and especially with a young guy like Brock Purdy. Does he make the big mistake if he's under pressure? Of course, hopefully not. But this Commanders team, they're pretty mediocre against the run. But again, getting a guy like Chase Young back, I'm not saying he's on Nick Bosa's level, but he's not far from it from what we saw early in his career. Now, moving on to the next big matchup here, and I'm going to be talking about the 49ers secondary up against the Commanders wide receivers. Let me throw some stats your way about how good the 49ers cornerbacks have been playing. Mooney Ward only allowing a 79 quarterback rating when being targeted, only allowing 55% completion rate, giving up a couple of touchdowns, had an interception, but something big here as well is that he has not missed a tackle all season long, which is so important in this 49ers defense. The Niners ask the cornerbacks to be physical, to be able to make tackles, but also to help out in the run game, and he certainly can do that. Now, let's not forget Deommodore Lenoir. He's been playing really good football, filling in for Emmanuel Mosley, who of course suffered that injury against Carolina. Lenoir only allowing an 80 quarterback rating, 66% completion rate, but hasn't given up a touchdown yet. Now, these guys, they do have a big matchup against the Commanders. Let's talk about Terry McLaurin. over 1,000 yards on the year, 3 touchdowns, and he actually accounts for 22% of the targets when you look at the Washington Commanders. When they're throwing the ball, basically 1 out of every 4 or 5 times, it's going to Terry McLaurin. They have Jahan Dotson, who the last couple of games has started to come to life. 160 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns, so he's really developing and getting that chemistry and rapport down with a guy like Taylor Heinicke. And let's not forget Curtis Samuel, used very much like the Niners would use Deebo Samuel. Overall, 93 touches on the year, 57 receptions, 36 rushes. So he's one of those, multifaceted weapons, and the Niners will have to pay attention. When I look at this matchup here, especially just looking at the Niners defense and the Commanders offense. The Commanders, they really just like to run the ball effectively, try and get, 3-4 yards in first down, 3-4 yards on second down, pick up the first down, and then they'll air it out. We saw that against the Giants. Heinicke, if one thing, he's not afraid to throw the ball deep. Here's the thing, whenever you throw the ball deep, you always open up opportunities for things like, of course, long receptions, but pass interference. So the Niners secondary is going to have to be incredibly well disciplined, and that's something that we have been for the most part this year. Hufanga, congratulations to him. He's headed to the Pro Bowl, deservedly so. He's going to need to keep playing at that level. Tashawn Gibson, he's going to need to keep playing at the level he's been at. And of course, Jimmy Ward, and I think he's one of the key players here, being able, and I think he'll be the guy tasked with slowing down Curtis Samuel in the Washington offense. So I think there's a lot of key matchups here. And the last one that we are going to talk about is going to be, of course, with the quarterbacks. Brock Purdy, so far, everything we've asked him to do, I think he's done it very, very well. He's had a couple of throws that, of course, easily could have been interceptions, whether it was negated from a penalty or just dropped, but every quarterback has those, so let's be honest too. I think Purdy's done a very, very good job, but this is his biggest test to date, and I think it's really good for it to come at this point in the season because A, the 49ers, we've locked up the division. B, we have a couple of games after this one where we can maybe get him into a bit more of a rhythm if he struggles against Washington. But I just love Brock Purdy being able to go up against an elite defense like the Commanders. And of course, he goes up against the 49ers in practice every week, but that could really help him out when we get to the playoffs and when every defense and every team is going to be one of those elite teams. That's going to be huge for Brock Purdy. Now moving on to Taylor Heinicke, of course. And here's the thing. On the year, 10 touchdowns. He's had 9 turnovers, 61% completion rate. He's basically like your just average backup quarterback. Now, of course, he's also facing his biggest challenge of the year against this 49ers defense. We don't give up a lot. We're number 1 against the run. So if we can keep that pace going defensively, Heinicke's going to be put in a lot of very difficult situations. The 49ers will be able to get after Heinicke. What I love seeing recently is DeMeco Ryans not being afraid to send some blitzes, whether it's safety blitzes, cornerback blitzes, linebacker blitzes, just blitzes from anywhere and everywhere. Really love seeing DeMeco mix it up a little bit there. A guy like Taylor Heinicke who's going to have to basically sit back there in the pocket, let plays develop. That is assuming the Niners can shut down the run, and I think they will. So that's going to be a really, really big challenge for Heinicke. Now, ultimately, when it comes to this matchup as a whole, I'm going to give you guys my prediction momentarily. I think it's going to be a close matchup. These are two really, really good defenses going up against, look, let's be honest, both of these quarterbacks, they're not elite quarterbacks by any stretch of the imagination. So it's going to be tough sledding. It's going to be maybe who can have those big plays in the passing game or the run game, who can break the big play, who can have the big turnover, who can maybe have the big special teams play. It should be a close one. To me, though, I'm going to say 49ers 24, Commanders 14. I think it's going to be a close game, relatively low scoring game, but I do think the Niners defense is just that good, and I think Kyle Shanahan and the offense will be able to manufacture enough points to come away with the win. But here's the thing, there's a lot on the line here for the Commanders. This is a team that's at the number 7 seed in the playoffs, so they're going to be fighting for their playoff lives. So they have so much on the line. So don't expect this Commanders team to, shut down or to give up or anything. They're going to be playing full 60 minutes. They need this win. So it's going to be a really good matchup, guys. And of course, on Saturday, 1 p.m., we will be streaming the 49ers versus the Commanders. I hope you guys can all join me there for that. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. I want to give a huge shout out to everyone who checks out the streams, the videos, comments. It really, really helps the channel out a lot, and it means a lot to me. And again, guys, thank you so much for all the continued support. Do drop your thoughts in the comments below here, and for your thoughts when going into this big matchup against the Washington Commanders. Now, you know, guys, I want to say a huge thank you again. I'm going to say two things before I head on out. The butt counts. I'm going to catch you guys on the flip side.